In Cameroon, the president's only daughter published a video on social media that was last week Thursday, in which she appealed to voters and told them not to cast their ballot for her father in the upcoming presidential election. Paul Biya, that is the incumbent president of Cameroon, might have not imagined his campaign for his 7th re-election as president to take such a turn. His only daughter, Brenda Biya, called for Cameroon's population to not vote for her father in a video published on her TikTok account on Thursday. But here is what makes this story even crazier. Because when Paul Biya first became Cameroon's prime minister back in 1975, Jimmy Carter was just moving into the White House. Today, Biya is 92 years old. Some say he's even 93 or 94 years old. This man is still running for his 8th term as president, and Jimmy Carter has been out of office for more than 40 years. And look, this isn't just some story about Africa's longest-serving leaders clinging to power, or even about a family falling apart in public. This is about what happens when the rest of the world just decide to look the other way. Because right now, as Cameroon gets closer towards the election in October 12th, the most powerful countries on earth are saying absolutely nothing. Nothing about one of the most blatant, in-your-face election frauds happening anywhere on the continent. Let me just paint a picture for you. You've got a 92-year-old president who no one has even seen in public for weeks. He wants another 7 years, which would keep him in power until he's above 100 years old. His main opponent kicked off the ballot. Opposition rallies shut down with tear gas. Any journalist who even ask about the president's health, they get arrested. And here's the part that really shows you how deep this goes. Today marks exactly 5 years since 500 opposition supporters were arrested for peaceful protest. 5 years. Of those 500, 36 are still rotting in prison right now as I speak, sentenced by military courts for crimes of asking for change. Some of them will finally complete their sentences this month, but only after half a decade behind bars for exercising their basic fundamental human rights. But the craziest part, France, the United States, the European Union, the same countries that love to give lectures about democracy to Africans, are completely silent. So you have to ask, why? What do they know that we don't? You see, Paul Biya didn't just fall into power. Go back to 1982. The president, Ahmadou Ahidjo, does something almost no African leader did back then. He decides to step down voluntarily. He hands the reins to his loyal prime minister, Paul Biya, thinking he's got the perfect puppet. But Biya had other plans, because within months, he had played his old boss so badly that Ahidjo had to flee the country for his life, and he never came back. That's the kind of political game we are talking about here in Cameroon. Because for 42 years, Biya has been 10 steps ahead of everybody, his rivals, his friends, even the big international powers. And right now, while parts of Cameroon are in a total lockdown because of a civil war, while his opponents are literally disappearing into jail cells, and while 30,000 young citizens are gearing up to monitor what could be the most crooked election in Africa this year, the so-called champions of democracy are just quiet. So in this episode, we are going to get into it. How Western powers use their silence as a weapon. How Paul Biya basically wrote the book on rigging election, and why this vote is a huge test for whether democracy in Africa can even survive in this new world of digital dictators. Let's get into it. So in the video, which was taken in Switzerland, because that's where Brenda Biya stays, and she said that she would cut all contact with her parents and said that her family had mistreated her as well as people close to her, wanting her dead. She then pivoted to politics, saying that she would not vote for Paul Biya and that she hoped there would be another president. The video has gone viral and has been welcomed by the political opposition back in Cameroon. No known official reaction has come from the presidency or the government. Now, think about this for a second. This isn't just any random political opponent calling out Paul Biya. This is his own flesh and blood, someone who's seen the man behind the presidency up close for 27 years, and she's telling the world from Switzerland that she can't even support her own father. She can't even vote for her own father. And here's what makes the silence even more telling. Paul Biya hasn't been seen in public since September 8th. His government has made it illegal for any media outlet to even talk about his health. Journalists have been told they will face prison time just for asking the question, where is our president? When your own daughter publicly calls you out and you can't even respond, what does that say about your grip on power? Brenda Biya previously caused controversy with other videos on several occasions, notably showing herself dancing and also through a video published last year announcing her homosexuality, a sexual orientation which is deeply frowned upon in Cameroon. But this video is different. This isn't about her personal life or her lifestyle. This is a direct political attack on one of Africa's most powerful men, coming from the person who should be closest to him. And the timing, just weeks before an election, where Biya is trying to convince 27 million Cameroonians to give him another 7 years. Here's what makes this moment so symbolic. Brenda represents everything that Biya's Cameroon has failed. She's young, she's connected to the world, she speaks her mind freely, and she had to leave the country to do it safely. She's calling for change from exile in Switzerland, where her 92-year-old father clings to power back home. This family breakdown isn't happening in isolation. It's happening while Biya faces the biggest challenges of his entire 42-year rule. He's fighting wars on two fronts. His main rival has been kicked off the ballot through legal manipulation, and dozens of his political opponents have been locked up for years just for protesting peacefully. And just like everything else in this election, the world is watching this family drama unfold and saying basically nothing. The world is saying nothing, especially the custodians of democracy, because that's the story of Paul Biya's entire career. He's mastered the art of surviving in plain sight, while everyone should be paying attention looks the other way. September 22nd, 2025, and that date should mean something to everyone in Cameroon, because exactly 5 years ago, on September 22nd, 2020, over 500 Cameroonians were arrested for doing something that should be completely normal in a normal democracy. They participated in peaceful protest. They weren't violent revolutionaries. They weren't armed militias. They were ordinary citizens supporting the opposition party, Movement for the Renaissance of Cameroon. That's Maurice Kamto's party, the same Kamto who was just kicked off this year's ballot. They wanted change. They exercised their right to peaceful assembly, and for that, they were mass arrested. 5 years later, 36 of them are still in prison. Still, after half a decade behind bars, they are languishing in prison in Yaoundé, sentenced by military courts, not civilian courts, I might add, military courts, to between 5 and 7 years in prison. Let me put this into perspective for you. These people have been locked up for exercising their basic human rights longer than most university students take to get their degrees. Some of them have suffered stroke in prison and have been denied medical release. Their families have watched them waste away for 5 long years while the world stayed silent. And here's the kicker. By the end of this month, 24 of these prisoners will have served their full 5-year sentences. They should be walking free, but even their appeals have been ignored. As their lawyer said, 36 appeals have been lodged since 2022 with the Supreme Court of Cameroon, which has not yet ruled on any of them. The delays are unreasonable. Now, the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention looked at this case and said what everyone knows. The detention is arbitrary, it's illegal, it's a violation of international law. But Biya's government doesn't care what the UN thinks. But it gets worse. This isn't just about those 36 people from 5 years ago. The pattern continues. Because just this same August, 54 MRC supporters were arrested for showing up to election dispute hearings. 23 of them are now facing prosecution for inciting revolt. Their crime? Questioning an obviously rigged electoral process. On August 9th, a man was arrested and thrown into prison in Daola just for posting videos calling for demonstrations. The military court is prosecuting him for undermining the internal security of the state. His real crime? Using social media to ask for fairness. This is how you crush opposition in 2025. You don't need to kill everyone. Though Biya has really killed plenty, you just arrest some, throw them into military courts where they have no real right and let them rot while you hold your sham election. It's psychological warfare against anyone who dares to challenge power. Amnesty International's director put it perfectly. In recent years, everyone who dares to criticize the authorities, whether a human rights defender, a journalist, a political activist, or a protester, runs the risk of being arbitrarily arrested and detained, tortured, or otherwise ill-treated and tried by military courts. So, as Biya campaigns for another 7 years in power, 36 people are marking the 5th anniversary of their imprisonment for the crime of opposing him. And the countries that claim to be champions of democracy, they are not even acknowledging these prisoners exist. So, how do you get rid of your main rival in an election? Like a guy like Maurice Kamto, the guy who probably won the last election back in 2018. Well, you come up with a legal trick so ridiculous it almost sounds like a joke. You claim his own political party endorsed someone else without him knowing. Here's how the scam worked. Kamto's party, Manidem, somehow ended up with 2 presidential candidates registered under its name. So the Constitutional Council, which is packed with Biya's Buddhists, stepped in and says, well, a party can only have 1 candidate, so I guess we have to disqualify both of them. How convenient. But here's the twist. The actual leaders of the political party in question say they never ever endorsed that second guy. They say he's an impostor who hijacked their party's paperwork. So when they tried to hold a press conference to clear things up, security forces showed up and shut it all down. Just think about how planned out this was. Someone had to infiltrate an opposition party, 5 fake documents, get the Electoral Commission to accept them, and then use that to knock out the only real challenger to a 92-year-old dictator. This isn't just sloppy paperwork. This is precision engineered fraud. And the court that made this decision, the Constitutional Council, is the same group that got rid of the presidential term limit back in 2008, so Biya could run forever. Every single one of its members was appointed by Biya himself. They are not judges, they are employees. When Kamto's supporters tried to protest this, they were met with tear gas and batons. 53 people were arrested for showing up to hear the decision. Even the UN Human Rights Office called them out for it, pointing to all the irregularities and intimidation. But getting rid of Kamto was just one step. 83 people tried to run for president. Only 13 were approved. The rest disqualified for things like incomplete paperwork. What are the odds that 70 different candidates all messed up their forms? This has a name. It's called electoral authoritarianism. You keep the outside shell of a democracy. You hold a vote and you let observers in. You announce results, but you make sure there is no real choice. And somehow, miraculously, the 92-year-old is going to win again. But that's just one piece of the puzzle, because as we speak, in Cameroon's English-speaking regions, separatist fighters have locked down entire cities, and this election is supposed to happen there in just 3 weeks. So just a few days ago, 9 soldiers were killed. They were killed by separatist forces who are enforcing ghost towns across the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. These are regions that have been in a state of war with the government for 8 years now. Over 6,500 people are dead. 500,000 have been forced to flee their homes. This is Cameroon's dirty little secret. Because while the world is focused elsewhere, a brutal civil war has been tearing the country apart since 2016. The government calls the separatists terrorists. The separatists say it's a war for independence. The people stuck in the middle just call it a nightmare. These separatists fighting for a new country they call Ambazonia have ordered a total lockdown from September 8th all the way to October 14th, specifically to stop the election. Major cities like Bamenda are completely deserted. People are terrified to go outside. As one local leader said, Ambazonia will not vote its chains. Here's why this is so critical. These two regions make up about 20% of Cameroon's entire population, and they are not just boycotting the election, they are actively stopping it from happening. The fighters have threatened to kill anyone who even tries to vote, and they just prove they are serious by killing those 9 soldiers. But it gets worse. That's just one war. In the far north region, Boko Haram and ISIS are stepping up their attacks because back in March this year, they raided military bases and killed at least 20 soldiers. They are deliberately escalating the violence right as the country is supposed to be voting. So you've got a government trying to hold an election while fighting wars on 2 different fronts. In any normal country, this would be a reason to postpone the vote or at least for the war to raise some serious alarms. But Cameroon isn't a normal country, neither is it a normal democracy, and the world isn't showing normal concern. And the saddest part, these wars didn't just appear out of nowhere. They are the direct result of Biya's policies. The Anglophone crisis started with peaceful protest. Biya sent in the army and it turned into a war. The violence in the north is fueled by corruption and bad governance. So why Biya's government is fighting its own English-speaking citizens in one part of the country and Boko Haram in another? The regional alliances that we are supposed to help are completely falling apart. Okay, so you've got a vanishing president, a stolen election, and 2 wars. What could possibly make it worse? How about all your neighbors abandoning you? Because in March this year, Niger pulled its troops out of the regional anti-terror task force, basically leaving Cameroon to fight Boko Haram by itself. Now, Chad is threatening to do the same. And Rwanda, they just quit the Central African Regional Bloc, calling it useless. This alliance, the multinational joint task force, was supposed to be the big solution. Nigeria, Chad, Niger Republic, and Cameroon all working together. But now, one by one, they are all walking away. Niger Republic left after losing 40 of its own soldiers. They decided it's more important to protect their oil pipelines than to fight a regional war. Chad, which had some of the best soldiers, is getting tired of its troops being attacked. And Rwanda quitting the Central African Bloc was a huge blow. They said it was because the organization was weak, but really it was about politics over the Congo. All of this is happening at the worst possible time. Just when Cameroon is facing this massive crisis, the very institutions that are supposed to keep the region stable are collapsing. ECAS is too weak and divided to say anything about Cameroon's sham election. The anti-terror force is falling apart, and the African Union, you think they have something to say about an 8-year war with over 6,500 dead. But no, they have never once put the Anglophone crisis on their official agenda. It's simply cricket and silence. This isn't an accident. It's a symptom of a much bigger problem across the African continent, where leaders in places like Equatorial Guinea and Chad are doing the same thing as Biya. So nobody has the moral authority to call anyone else out. The UN is worried but can't do much. The regional groups are useless. Old allies are backing away. Cameroon is becoming more and more isolated right when it needs help the most. So with the country this fragile, you would think big global powers like France, the US, and the European Union will step in, right? Well, that's where the story really gets very weird. This is where it gets truly unbelievable. France just admitted that it killed tens of thousands of people in Cameroon during the country's fight for independence. President Macron himself acknowledged this repressive violence. But here's the hypocrisy. Macron is apologizing for what France did 70 years ago, but he won't say a single word about the repression happening right now in Cameroon. Biya's government has killed over 6,500 of his own people in the Anglophone war. Activists has been tortured until they are paralyzed. It's illegal to even talk about the president's health. Where is the condemnation for that? And the United States isn't any better. The US has 300 soldiers in Cameroon as I speak to you, supposedly training the army on human rights. Yet, when videos go viral showing these same soldiers executing civilians, including women and children, what does the US do? They call for an investigation and then just keep the military cooperation going. So what's really going on here? It's simple. The West needs Cameroon. They see it as an anchor of stability in a chaotic region and a partner in fighting terrorism. So they will ignore almost anything to keep it that way. In Western diplomacy, it calls see no evil. So they will ignore almost anything to keep it that way. France has been kicked out of half of West Africa by the revolutionary leaders in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, so they don't have much leverage left. And the US is more worried about competing with China and Russia in Africa than it is about democracy. The European Union, their last major statement on Cameroon was back in 2018. They said they wanted dialogue. 8 years and 6,500 deaths later, they are still calling for dialogue. This selective blindness tells you everything you need to know. When it's convenient, they will shout about human rights. When it's not, they choose strategic silence. The same countries that put sanctions on Zimbabwe and condemn coups everywhere else are treating Cameroon's dictatorship as just an internal issue. Why? Because Biya, for all his flaws, serves their interest. This silence isn't an accident, it's a choice. It's a calculated political decision. But while the powerful stay quiet, something incredible is happening on the ground. Cameroon's young people are organizing the most advanced election monitoring effort this continent has ever seen. 30,000. That's the number you need to remember. That's how many young Cameroonians are getting ready to monitor polling stations across the country through a citizen-led initiative called DISO. And they are not just standing there watching. They are using smartphone apps and advanced statistical methods that can expose fraud with about 99.5% accuracy. They are betting their own freedom on the idea that democracy can somehow find a way to win. This is something new for African nations. This is a tech-savvy generation using the world's best practices to fight back against a dinosaur regime. They are creating representative samples of polling places. Even if they can't be everywhere, they can prove if the final count is fake. And they are using both apps and simple SMS text. So when the government inevitably shuts down the internet, they can still get the results out. But this isn't just about technology. This is a generational revolt. Over 60% of Cameroon's population is under 35. The median age is just 18. These kids have never known a world where Paul Biya wasn't president, and they are tired of being ruled by a man from their grandparents' generation. The pressure is boiling over because while official youth unemployment sits at around 6%, when you factor in underemployment and those stuck in informal work that barely pay survival wages, the real picture is much bleaker. Studies show that 94% of youth between 15 to 19 years old and 84% between 20 and 24 years are underemployed. Most young people who do have jobs are trapped in the informal sector, where workers earn an average of about $140 per month. So when the ruling party claims that young supporters donated $65,000 for Biya's campaign in a country where the minimum wage is $78 a month, everybody knows it's a lie. The irony is just perfect. You have a 92-year-old president trying to look cool with fake social media posts he didn't even write, while actual young people are organizing the most sophisticated democratic movement in the country's history on platforms he doesn't even understand. These 30,000 poll watchers are more than just monitors. They represent the hope that maybe, just maybe, technology can finally level the playing field between the people and dictators. They are about to find out if citizen action can beat 4 decades of systematic manipulation. So on October 12th, the question isn't just whether Paul Biya will win. We know how that's supposed to go. The real question is whether 4 decades of authoritarian engineering can survive a generation that has never been free and is tired of waiting. The answer won't just decide Cameroon's future. It might just show us what's next for the fight for democracy across Africa, especially when the rest of the world is looking the other way. Now, if you have watched to this point, this is Frontline Africa, where we talk about geopolitics from Africa's own point of view, where we talk about the stories the mainstream media avoids. So if you are in Cameroon, go to the comment section and let us get the whole facts straight. If I have gotten any of my report wrong, maybe politely correct me in the comment section. The idea is to get the truth out there. I am not in Cameroon. I don't have the resources to mobilize sources to come and cover whatever is happening in Cameroon. But what I can do is use available information on the internet to corroborate my report. So if any of my reports is factually wrong, please go to the comment section and politely correct it. Maybe if you want to see more of my videos, maybe consider to subscribe and turn up those notifications. I am your host, Ezekiel Enejeta, and I will see you in the next one. It's a bye-bye for now.